The Hebrew word for covenant is berit, which comes from the Hebrew word bara, which means to cut or to divide. And I'm going to show you the relevance of that meaning shortly. The Greek word used in the Bible for covenant is diatheke. Diatheke. And this Greek word misses the mark rather substantially as a translation of the Hebrew word berit. Now, I've taught you on a number of occasions that culture and language come as a package, and that within any given culture, they have a number of traditions and ideas and some basic societal concepts that are unique, for the most part, to their culture, pretty foreign to other cultures. And since that's the case, there are many unique Hebrew concepts, such as the concept embodied in the Hebrew word berit, or shalom, or Mashiach, Messiah, that don't always have parallels in another language or culture. I want you to think about that for a moment, because unless you're a language expert, it isn't readily apparent to most of us that there are words in one language that don't directly correspond to a word in another language. That is, we can't just make a list of Hebrew words and then make a parallel list alongside that that represents their English equivalents. As a matter of fact, it takes approximately 1/3 more English words than Hebrew words to say the same thing. A Hebrew Bible is only about, that is written in Hebrew, is only about 2/3 of the number of pages of an English Bible. That ought to be a clue about translation difficulty right there. I want to illustrate this for you. Yom, very simple Hebrew word, means day in English. It is the same concept in both English and Hebrew. They have it in common. It's pretty straightforward. It's the concept of a 24-hour period of time, one rotation of the earth, and they each have a word to precisely define that concept. Yom in Hebrew means day in English. So we got a good match. But the word shalom in Hebrew embodies an overall concept that simply doesn't exist either in Greek or in English-speaking cultures. And since the concept of shalom doesn't exist in Greek or English cultures, naturally, there's no Greek or English word equivalent for it. So the Bible translator tries for something near to it. Or he'll use a series of words to try to get the concept across to the reader. With our example of shalom, for existence, we often see the words peace or grace used in English to translate that single word shalom. But peace and grace just scratch the surface of what that single word shalom means to the Hebrew mind, because it's a concept. It's the name of a concept. More troublesome, though, is what happens when a translator has insufficient understanding of the culture behind the language he's trying to translate. You don't need to be at all familiar with French culture to learn to speak French. You don't need to be familiar with Hebrew culture to learn to speak Hebrew. The problem is that without uniting the understanding of the culture that's tied together with its language, the translator will only understand what that word means in the context of his own cultural sense, not theirs. You see what I mean? And that's the main problem we have with Bible translations. Precious few translators have any depth of knowledge of ancient Hebrew culture and concepts. And worse, I'm afraid to say, often there are built-in prejudices against Hebrew culture. So the translation goes forward with a negative view or an outright incorrect understanding. Now, many of us who've purchased small appliances or electronic widgets made in China, which is probably 2/3 of them, often find the accompanying instruction manuals to sound a little bit odd. Sometimes they can be downright funny. I vividly recall buying a writing toy for one of my grandchildren, and I was told in the assembly manual I was to tighten a certain screw or a nut until it was happy. Now, how do I know when that screw is happy? Of course, in the Chinese way of thinking, a correctly tightened screw is a happy screw. And in a dictionary, you'll find that the words happy and correct, you know what? They have very similar meanings. But for Americans, at least, happy is an emotion. It's an emotion that's displayed by living beings. It's not a technical term. It's not a mechanical term. So the word happy seems appropriate enough to a Chinese translator, but the concept is all fouled up when you cross over cultural boundaries. Do you see my point? We have that same problem in so many places in the Bible.